Well, hello and welcome to the podcast from the Huffines Institute for Sports Medicine and Human Performance. I'm your host, Tim Lightfoot, and I'm so glad that you took the time to join us. You're watching us someplace in the world, or you've downloaded us and you're listening to us or watching us somewhere. Every time we do one of these podcasts, we bring an interesting person in the world of sports medicine and human performance to meet with you, to let you know what they're doing and why they're doing it in particular. And this week is no exception. We have a returning guest with us this week, Dr. Natasha Brison from our Division of Sports Management in our Department of Health and Kinesiology. Welcome back to the podcast, Natasha.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's always great to have you. Let me tell the audience a little bit about you and why we're excited to have you here. And then we'll just jump right in to the conversation.
Perfect.
So Dr. Brison is currently an assistant professor for sports management at Texas A&M University. That's going to change before too long, I think, in a positive way.
I hope so.
She got her jurisprudence doctorate at the University of Georgia School of Law. So yes, she's a practicing attorney. She got a master's degree in sports administration from Georgia State University in Atlanta, and then a PhD in kinesiology. Just couldn't get enough of that schooling, could you?
No, and the only thing I'm missing is an MBA.
Yeah, okay. That's next week, next year.
Next year.
She got her PhD in kinesiology at the University of Georgia, and she's been at Texas A&M for several years. For those of you that are interested in trivia, the last time we interviewed her on the podcast was podcast number 217 back in June of 2017. It's been longer than both of us thought, right?
It's gone fast.
Yeah. Her specialty is she primarily works in athletic marketing issues related to brand management and protection amongst athletes. And so let's just start with a real common question. You were a successful attorney. How come you decided to come back into academia and focus on sports marketing?
Well, I get that question a lot, especially from students. Like, you were a lawyer working in entertainment and sports, and that had to have been exciting, but it just felt like something was missing. And I got into academia, and it felt like I was at home. And I love working with the students. And in this capacity at Texas A&M, I'm doing research, which adds a whole nother level to the things I'm doing with clients in the field. And so it's just a great fit for what I'm doing now.
So your area of expertise is brand management.
Yes.
Tell the audience what that is. And how do you protect a brand management?
I guess in its simplest form, most people don't think about this, but everyone has a brand. And oftentimes we think you're a celebrity or an athlete or a movie star, and they have brands. But in its simplest form, you and I have brands. And when you think about how you perceive yourself and as well as how others perceive you, that's exactly what your brand is. And it's so interesting because even just like products, human brands go through life cycles or product cycles where they can grow, they can mature, they can die out a little bit, they can be reinvigorated. And those are the things that I'm most interested in now. And some of the research I'm looking at is taking it not just from the athlete's context, but looking at coaches and retired WNBA players and how they branded themselves post-career for the players. For the coaches, it's been really intriguing to me because coaches go through several career changes as well over time. And sometimes it's just about thinking about those things that are going to help them further their career or go to the next institution. And now with some of the other changes regarding the NCAA, I feel like the coaches are the ones to help the athletes learn more about developing, managing, and protecting their brands. And so when we talk about protection, just to kind of go to your next question, we're talking about trademarks and being able to protect the intellectual property. So it could be a nickname, it could be a slogan that a player uses, but
like
all of those—
Johnny Football.
Like Johnny Football, who actually had a trademark lawsuit related to Johnny Football. And so now I think with the changes, well, potential changes with the NCAA, but all of the different states looking at fair pay for play acts, this has become a hot ticket item that is going to require a lot of education of the athletes and those who are there to help them. But it definitely comes with some pros and cons. So
this is, but as you say, this really is coming to the forefront because now these athletes can make money off their, or potentially can make money off their image, off their name.
Yeah.
where they haven't been allowed to in the past.
Yes.
And that's going to be a big leap for some of these kids coming out of high school in
Right.
particular. And we're talking probably primarily about football and basketball in general,
Yes.
right?
Yes. But with some of the rules that are regulations and laws that are being put in place, all of the athletes are going to potentially benefit from this. And so with regards to how the players are being compensated, some states have actually created a fund that I think, and I can't remember which state specifically right now, but the regulation was for 15% of the revenue coming into athletics to go into two separate funds. One was a wage fund, and one was, I believe, kind of like a disability type fund to help if they get hurt. And then 5,000 of that money would go into each athlete's account, like a trust. And then each year that they play, $5,000 is added. As long as they remain academically eligible, they'll get this money. And then when they graduate, they have to take a financial literacy course and graduate, of course, with a good GPA, they'll get this money.
It would be great if all students got a financial literacy course.
Yes,
maybe
absolutely.
we can advocate for all of our students to take that.
I think that'd be a great idea. And in the past, I've gone to guest lecture for different athletic sports to talk about financial literacy and why it's important. Even if you're not going professional, there are some things that students just need to know about managing money, and especially in a situation where you wake up one morning and you have millions of dollars, how quickly it can go when you start paying everyone and buying mom a house and a car. I don't think the athletes realize just how limiting that money is. And then even if you don't go pro, the importance of understanding things essential as a FICO score and how to manage credit. And there have been changes even in just how the FICO system is rated lately. And so credit's extremely important for even just a normal everyday person. So I think what interests me most about the research I do is that it definitely has some everyday implications.
Right.
So whether you're an athlete or a normal person, from managing your brand to, if you manage your brand well, you're going to build value. Right. And that value can come in increased employment opportunities and higher pay is one thing. So
can you give us an example of someone who's managed their brand well?
One of my favorites is LeBron. He's done extremely well with everything he's done. And I think even with regards
maybe except
to
the decision broadcast.
Yeah, that's true. Except for the decision. That was an interesting one. But I think he's been able to still be authentic and remain true to himself, even when people didn't agree with what he was saying. You understand, if you're a fan of LeBron, that's who he is. And I think that's what's also important about brand management, to be true to yourself and the values and beliefs that you have. And essentially that's what makes you who you are. And when you are authentic with those elements, all people can do is respect you.
And social media makes it both easier and harder.
Oh, yes.
I think it seems to be more fraught with potential for
absolutely
messing up your brand.
Yes.
As well as enhancing your brand.
And I think also in line with the changes with the NCAA, high schools have social media policies, and a lot of those policies are more restrictive rather than encouraging the athletes on how best to use social media. And I think some of those policies are going to have to change in order to better prepare the athletes for what's to come. When you say
restrictive, they just say no, you can't do it?
Yeah, there are even some colleges that tell their teams they cannot post on social media during the season, and they've restricted them from doing it. There are schools, like, for example, UNC is a little bit more educational regarding their policies, so they tell them, here are some things that are not appropriate, but here are some great ways that you can use social media in order to help your brand.
So this is a relatively new topic. Social media as we know it really has only kind of matured in the last 10 to 12 years.
Right.
And actually even probably less than that.
Yeah.
So, and you talked about coaches a while ago.
Yes.
And coaches are usually an older demographic. Are they having tough time struggling with this kind of thing?
I've seen it from early career to mid-career and late career. But, for example, there was a coach down in Florida who was hired for a job. He received a contract, But before he even set foot on campus, they rescinded the contract because of a post he had 3 years earlier on Facebook. And the school essentially said that they felt like his values didn't align with the school's values because of this single post. And so in my work with coaches, what I'm hoping to do is to get them to clean up those profiles, understand how best to use social media in order to enhance what they're doing. And oftentimes you get these coaches who have no idea they're going to be thrust into the spotlight.
Right.
And they have to do interviews. So there's basic just media training they need to understand. And part of that is understanding social media and how it can help or hinder their careers.
Yeah, they forget that everything they say is now going to be worldwide
Absolutely.
forever unless you figure out how to get it off.
And I think the other thing that people struggle with, and I struggle with this myself, is that there are people who are going to disagree with things you say, and knowing how best to deal with those situations instead of escalating them is important as well. And I've had colleagues who are very prominent on social media decide to back away for a certain time period just because it's gotten very contentious over a topic.
We have to remember that this is going to be out there in the digital world. And
yes.
So someone may come back to you in 3 years and give you a promotion because you were on this podcast, actually.
I hope so.
So that would be brand augmentation, right?
It would be brand augmentation.
That's right.
And increasing my value.
Yeah, well, increasing all of our value.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm curious about the coaches, though. We come back to that because, again, we have the Coaching Academy at A&M, and that's kind of one of the topics that's starting to be talked about is how do the coaches maintain, as you say, their brand, so they maintain their marketability.
Yes.
Because we know some coaches that aren't marketable right now. You get a show cause from the NCAA, and
yes, absolutely,
that's kind of killing your brand right there.
Well, I mean, even with coaches, when it comes to recruiting, they're selling themselves, they're selling their schools, and really an athlete decides to come to an institution because of the coach at the end of the day, or someone they've connected with in athletics and part of that coaching team, and so it's important for them to communicate a strong message where the players understand what they stand for. And I mean, I've seen athletes leave institutions because they don't agree with the values of a coach. And I've seen coaches leave institutions because they don't agree with the values of the institution. And I think everyone needs to align in order for the entire system to be successful.
Yeah, I think Bobby Petrino and how his brand has gone up and down and up and maybe down, and so and
that's that life cycle that I talked about, where the brand can go through stages. And what's always nice is that when you think about stages, that they can also be renewed. And I think we talked comic books earlier, so I think of the Phoenix as that's a very good example of what brands can do, that they can rise out of the ashes, even when you think that there's nothing you can come back from.
There's no way they can
there's
come
no
back.
way they can come back from this. But
so what do you see as the future? Where's all this going? I mean, it almost seems saturated as it is now.
Yes.
But so how do you protect your brand when you're on stage 24 hours a day?
Yeah, and that's the difficult part, because sometimes you don't even know that you're a brand.
Yeah.
And so things as simple as getting a domain name, because there are cyber squatters who will buy your domain name because you haven't, and then hold it hostage. I mean, that was a situation with Chris Bosh. Oh. And so someone had bought up chrisbosh.com and other variations, and he actually had to sue them to get the domains back. And fortunately, there is legislation in place to help with that. But it's still time consuming and messy, and just as simple as, okay, if I want a domain name for my own webpage, that I have to be forward thinking about those things. And then even registering trademarks, and registering a trademark can get expensive. On the state level, it's fairly inexpensive, where it could be $30 or so. On the federal level, it can start at $225 per class that you register the name under. So it's there are advantages and disadvantages. Previously, I guess with the previous legislation with the NCAA or the bylaws, players couldn't benefit off of their name and likeness. And so For example, Marvin Bagley III had an issue with someone who was selling T-shirts, and he was told that he had to go after them for trademark infringement, and if he didn't get them to stop, then he would be deemed ineligible. And I was like, but this is a third party using your name and likeness, and you're going to suffer repercussions because of someone else's actions. And eventually the case kind of just went away, and I think maybe someone saw the error of their ways.
Yeah. Will the new rules from the NCAA prohibit that kind of thing? Will you think it'll help?
I think we're going to see a whole new, I guess, category of issues. And I think it's going to start with educating the players about, first, what is a brand and that they are a brand, and then protecting it and how best to do that. So there'll need to be tons of lawyers involved in that aspect of it. But I think the other thing that's going to happen is we're going to see the agency issue is already a concern with some of the top players. And so now with the opportunity to have players make money off of their name and likeness, we're going to see we're going to see more agents actively go after these athletes even earlier than them declaring for a draft or something like that. And so I think the NCAA needs to get out ahead of this.
I was going to say, are they out ahead of this? Because as you mentioned, I'm sitting here going, this is a ramification I haven't thought about, but it makes sense.
They actually, early February, well, actually mid-February, Mark Emmert actually went before the Senate and was pleading with Congress to essentially help to create federal legislation so that all the states are not coming up with their own guidelines. And when one of the senators asked him what kind of timeline they were on for the NCAA to make changes, he was like, at the earliest, it would be January of 2021 before the bylaws would be revised. So
that's actually fast, though, faster than I expected.
It's going to take time,
yeah.
and hopefully. Well, I think there are some states that were trying to enact their legislation sometime this year.
Wow.
And so, I mean, that's going to happen before the NCAA catches up, unfortunately. But I think all parties are going to have to work together, whether it's Congress, the NCAA, universities and institutions are going to have to be there to help guide the athletes. And the other thing, I was speaking with a colleague a couple days ago, and he said, what about the resources that it's going to take to be able to facilitate this? You're going to need more compliance officers.
Right.
You're going to need more lawyers coming in to help. And he saw it as a negative. I saw it as, that's an opportunity for more jobs. So I teach in sport management. Here are more opportunities for my students to get jobs. And he was just like, okay, only you, glass half full. And I was like, well, you're empty. So someone's got to be positive about this.
Yeah. I mean, you think about entertainers in the music business.
Yes.
Even when they're young, they have the right to agents and representation.
Yes. Yeah.
And so to some extent, it's unfair, even if you have a high school kid or a middle school kid who's a fantastic athlete. I think a gymnast, who are performing at the world level, or skaters, there's no reason they shouldn't have an agent.
That's true.
Yeah.
And be educated on how best to make that decision.
Right.
Yeah.
It's been fabulous talking to you, as always. And at the end of this, since you've gone through this before, we ask our guests to give us their take-home message. So if someone watched this and they remember nothing else, what do you want them to remember?
Oh, wow. That's always a difficult one. Always be true to yourself. And I think everything else will fall into place.
That's a good thought for everybody, right?
And whatever that means, it's take it as you want. But if you just be true to yourself and be kind to yourself too.
Yeah, we need a lot more of that now, don't we?
Yeah.
A lot more laughter.
Yes, more laughter would be awesome.
That's our editorial opinion for the day, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So also regular listeners of our podcast know that we take this time to have a podcast question. Our podcast question that's rapidly coming into the phone, it says, how can coaches help educate athletes on how to manage their brand and social media presence? So be the first one to send us the correct answer at Huff Hines Institute at tamu.edu. That's Huff Hines Institute at tamu.edu. And you can win one of our nifty podcast t-shirts. And we usually give away more than one of those, so don't hesitate to send us that answer. Natasha, thank you again for being back with us.
Thank you.
Again. And interesting stuff. We look forward to having you back on in the future to find out how things are going with that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And thank you all for taking the time to be with us today, to take the time to watch and download us and listen. Please reach out and tell your friends about our podcast. It only helps if more people know about it. So again, thank you, and we hope that you will be active and healthy. Welcome to our discussion today with Dr. Natasha Brison about the superpowers of super beings. Right.
But I think in a battle between Batman and Iron Man, I think Iron Man would win.
And, okay, we're really going to have to cut this out.